welcome. It's been a minute since I have been on the show and done one of these episodes. And so I'm so happy to be back. So happy to be able to be connected and just chatting with everyone. And I have an amazing guest today, which I'm so happy and excited to talk to. If you're here, would love for you to comment in the chat, ask questions if you have them. Just come and join the conversation with us. And my name is Jen Spencer, for those of you that don't know me, and I'm the co founder of Pause and Expand. We are a community that supports mental well being. We do mindset coaching and mindset training to really help teams and organizations to get more in a positive headspace. And I started Beneath the Surface about 6 months ago. And some of you that are here now have been to some of the other episodes that I've done, but really why I started this show was that I wanted to understand how successful people are using spirituality, are tapping into and harnessing a positive mindset, and how it's influencing their path to success. And what's really interesting that I'm learning about this process, because I like to think of things as experiments where I just kind of go in and I experiment with trying something new, taking a risk, putting myself out there and seeing what might happen on the other side. And what I'm learning about the different guests that I've had on the show is we are in such a fast paced and changing world. And we are waking up and developing new awareness that we never had before. And what I'm learning is that as leaders, there's this experience happening where we're becoming more open to being more vulnerable and sharing about what's really happening and what's really going on beneath the surface, which I think is ultimately the reason why I called this show Beneath the Surface. And so that's what this is all about. So really it's about real conversations, putting ourselves out there, seeing what happens when I approach my work and my life with deeper vulnerability and how I can be met in that way too. So I'm super, super excited today, right now in this moment, to introduce my next guest. Her name's Lauren Tropeano, and she is the Chief People Officer at Skillshare. And she's been transforming high performing teams and building culture for so many years. She's got so much wisdom, so much experience. And Lauren's also an executive coach, and she's worked with a number of CEOs and senior leaders really to help them find and uncover their purpose. So I'm just really excited today to talk to Lauren about all the things. We could probably go on for hours and hours about this, but I really want to talk to Lauren about what she sees for the future of culture in high performing organizations, what her biggest learnings have been in guiding others to find their true purpose. And, as you know, with these conversations, we always go into places we didn't even realize were possible. So I'm just going to bring Lauren on the stage and welcome her. Hi, Lauren.
Hi. Thank you so much for
Welcome.
having me, Jen.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. The cool thing about this experience has been that I keep getting introduced to the most amazing people. And when you and I had a conversation a month ago and we talked about you coming on the show, there was just this excitement that I had because there's so many parallels to the way that we think and the way that you approach your business and the work you do. And I'm just excited to dig into all those things.
Thank you
So,
so much. Yeah, likewise. We had so much fun in our initial conversation, and it really it brought me back to remembering that people can be in way different disciplines in life with the work that they do and have so many similarities and synergies to how they
yeah.
approach the world and some of the ways that they think about things. So
Yes.
excited to be here.
Love it. So, would love for you to just tell us all a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm based in Boston, and I have a husband and three young girls. So our house is very busy. I also have a dog and a cat, and just
All the things.
lots of beings in my home. And yeah, we have a lot of fun. We try not to take ourselves too seriously. We love traveling, hiking, going to the beach. I like to express myself creatively through cooking and flower art and things like that. So that's just a little bit about me. I've been in the as you mentioned, I'm a chief people officer today. I've been in the HR field for longer than I can even admit, over 20 years now. And mostly my work has been in tech companies. I spent some time living in the Silicon Valley and also now here, obviously, on the East Coast as well. And that's been big companies like Dell, and smaller companies such as growing startups and everything in between.
Very cool. It always amazes me how you can have such a powerful and a successful career and also be an amazing mother at the same time. It's
Oh,
something that's completely so inspiring to me that you can just manage your life in so many ways. Um, one of the things I've been curious about, especially in the work that we're doing in, culture and people and the way that the world is changing is understanding what culture means. So, when I ask you the question of what does culture mean to you in a company and how it's changing, what do you think about that?
yeah, I think culture is a really interesting term, right? It's talked about everywhere. Everyone's talking, what is culture? And oh, my culture is this or my culture is that. I think it has a ton of different definitions. For me, I think about culture as like the expression of who a company is, and
Mm,
that manifests itself in what I think is like a couple of different ways. So, um, culture has a few different components. The first thing that is like, why do you exist as a company? Like, what do you stand for, and what are you, born into the world to do? And then, what do you value as an
mm,
organization of people, focused on that mission or on that outcome? And then how do you operate to actually get that thing done, right? So
mm,
how do you communicate with each other? Um, how do you show up and get work done, collaborate, all of that, right? So it's really like about like how do you behave or how do you act to get
yeah.
your work done? So when you kind of package all of that up, that's really, I think, how culture expresses itself. Now, I think, a common way that companies kind of try to approach it is like, "Oh, I want my culture to be this." And so
Mm,
they want to sort of say what it is and dictate what it is, but I view culture as kind of like a personality, and
mm,
you can't really choose exactly what it is. You can have a vision for what you want to become over time with deliberation and practice, but it takes a lot of, like, curation and thoughtfulness. So yeah, that's what I would say culture isn't from my perspective. It's really about like who you are as an organization of people working to get something really important and meaningful done.
I love that. Talk to me a little bit more about that because I think there's something really interesting in what you said around, it being like a personality. So you
Mhm.
can't, if you think of interacting with the person, you can't force that person to be something that they're not.
Right.
So in the role that you play as a chief people officer, how do you work with that personality in different organizations? How does that work?
Yeah. Yeah. So what I would say is like so for really early companies that are either just forming or are kind of getting into the space where they're just starting to focus on this work, um, I think it's like you don't necessarily have a culture per se. It's usually an expression of who the founder is and where they're
Mm,
focused and how they want to get their work done. That's a really great time to do visioning. And so, you can work together and do visioning workshops or whatever it might be. It doesn't have to be anything super fancy or formal, but it's like, well, who who would you like to be as an organization in a couple of years? What are the things that would make you proud? What are some personal values that you have that you want to espouse within this organization?
yeah.
Yeah. And then for companies that have gone through multiple life cycles and all of that, sometimes you need to sort of just take inventory of where you are, and it might not be something that you're proud of or who you actually want to be, or you need to transform and make a pivot.
Mm,
So in my role, my job is to really help to uncover really what exists. It's not good, bad, or anything. It's again like a personality. I don't actually believe that there's anything such as a good culture or a bad culture. It's
mm,
about whether or not there's alignment with the people that are working within that um, organization, and if that's actually working for your business in terms of achieving what you want, what you set out to achieve in the world.
yeah.
And so, it's really about that deliberate alignment and actually taking a step back. And again, if you're a co-founder or a CEO or in a leadership role, really making sure that that feels authentic for you. because, there's a tendency to wanna say, like, "Oh, my values are similar to Google's," or "My values are," this popular sort of phrase or thing that a lot of companies try to espouse, but if that's not actually authentic to who you are and how you would, um, want to work every single day, then, that it probably won't work. And
Yeah.
so the authenticity is actually a really important cornerstone of making sure that that culture manifests itself and is cared for and curated in the way that, it needs to be in order to, make it happen.
Mm. I love that perspective because I think, when I think about culture, it's interesting, like the pressure that we put on ourselves to create these incredible, high performing cultures. How do you think mindset plays a role in shaping culture and shaping sort of overall performance in an organization, in a company?
Yeah, mindset is I don't think mindset has ever been more important than it has been in this moment.
Mm,
And I say in this moment, like, really since the pandemic, because I think everybody in the world really had their lives turned upside down, and there's no change more, incredible than being told that you can't leave your home or you're worrying for your health and safety, right?
yeah.
I mean, that is like a total macro level beyond what you might, do within your, your professional career. So I think how people embrace the reality that they're in and the
Mm,
mindset with which they view that, right? Like, I think about it as like lenses, different lenses that you can apply. If you go to the eye doctor, they kind of put different lenses in front of you. Um, what lens you use or what mindset you have really does shape the experience that you live within. And
yeah.
so that could be the difference between seeing something as a problem or an opportunity, seeing
Mm,
something as a learning or a failure, seeing something as a temporary setback or a forever, black mark on your record, right? So,
yeah.
the ability to really be very mindful of the mindset that you're in, and it doesn't always need to be positive, but just knowing, "Hey, where am I right now?
Yeah.
And is this gonna be the most productive thing for me in this moment, in this setting?" And, how can I then take back some of my power, my agency, and, um, really feel a sense of ownership for how I show up in this world and kind of get back in that driver's seat. That I think is so powerful with respect to having a positive effect on culture.
Yeah.
And so, just to get back to your original question, a lot of organizations right now are looking to build more resilience, right? They want people that have growth mindsets. They want people who can navigate and maneuver productively through change. And again, it's not that organizations are asking people to always be positive about those things. I think they want people to be practical and realistic, but it's about how that individual moves through those experiences, which
Mm,
can really have a big effect on burnout, stress, their ability to kind of cope productively and not turn to, destructive coping mechanisms and things like that.
yeah.
And that ultimately leads to higher performance because you're not, burnt out, you're not stressed out, you're able to focus and do all the things that you need to.
Yeah. It feels like there's a realness about the way that you talk about culture, the way that you talk about mindset, that, the reality and what you just shared is like, we're not always going to be in a positive mindset, but how do we move with what's going on and allow ourselves to see the possibility of like the learning in all of it?
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
what role, when you think of this concept of mindset, I'm loving the way this conversation is moving in like cultures, that personality of the company, how mindset plays a role in all of this. What role do you think senior leaders and executives play in shaping the culture and the mindset of employees? When you mentioned, culture, and how culture is really starts at the personality of the person that started the organization, but how do you see the role of executives and leadership playing a role in shaping culture and mindset?
Yeah. Um, culture, everybody owns culture and, kind of
Mm,
puts their fingerprints all over it, right? So if you have one person at the top that's just saying, "Oh, this is who we are. This is, what we do or where we're focused," but it actually doesn't end up going anywhere beyond that top layer, well then,
mm,
you can't you kind of have to have everyone rowing in the same direction. With that said, I really do believe that leadership, and it starts with the CEO, executive team, so on and so forth, really sets the tone for the culture.
mm.
And so, again, it's less about the words that might be on a wall or on your website and more about how do you act every day, right? So,
Yeah,
for example, if a company says that they value respect and kindness or empathy, things like that, but then, they've got an executive team or leadership or even tolerate people that are in the company that are jerks or that are bullies or things like that, then that is again you're kind of in not in alignment with
yeah.
what you're doing and saying, and therefore there becomes trust issues and things like that.
Mm,
So I think that leaders have a totally outsized role in helping to curate and cultivate and care for the culture that they have, if it's a really great, culture and it's working for them, or to really be like active in maneuvering the culture towards the direction that they want to go, right?
yeah,
And we hear a lot about this with respect to DEIB work. If people at the top aren't focused on that, then it's not going to be a priority. Or if people don't speak to each other candidly and kindly and things like that, then again, it's not going to be the example that's set, and therefore, people kind of follow what they see and what their
yeah,
leaders are doing. So I think
yeah,
it's really important. You can't just say, "Oh, everybody else can do that, and I'm just going to kind of go and do my own thing or be myself." You
yeah.
need to set that example
Yeah, it needs to be
every
a
day,
cohesive
every day.
experience.
Mhm.
What's an example? So, can you give me an example of something that you have either done in your organization that you're in currently or in a previous experience where you've seen the example of positive mindset, integrated culture within an organization?
Let me think here for a second. Yeah. So, I mean, I think, when a company goes through a setback, right? So, for example, if a company has a layoff or if, there's a really important leader that's departed the organization, things like that. Those are, examples I've worked through,
Yeah.
myself over the past year. Um, really, like having your CEO, for example, this is something that we did at Skillshare, having your CEO, kind of really transparently talk people through, hey,
Mm,
this is how I'm thinking about this. Like this this might be a hard thing for us to swallow, right? Like not
yeah.
sugarcoating it, not again trying to like move into toxic positivity, but just being really honest. Hey, this is a really challenging time for us. And it's challenging for you and it's challenging for everybody at the company. And with that said, we can really bond, we can band together and move together towards this change really productively, or we can fracture and kind of create these silos and make this whole experience a lot more painful and difficult. So
Mm,
if we can embrace the correct mindset for the conditions that we're in, which is let's lean into our value of community, let's be transparent with each other, let's support each other when we're struggling, then that's, I think, how we can set the tone, so to speak, in terms of like the mindset that's necessary to progress through, in this example, a little bit more of like a challenging or difficult time.
yeah.
And again, you might notice we're not asking people to forget the thing that happened or to, be thankful that you're still like working here or anything like that, because that just isn't helpful, frankly. It's more
Yeah.
about like how can you actually orient your mindset and what is within your power to productively move together and to support other people that are going through something similar,
Mm,
because it's a spectrum. Some
yeah.
people will digest things and move through change or conflict or whatever it might be very quickly, and other people it takes a very long time and they need
Yeah.
support.
Yeah. Do you see more willingness to be vulnerable in organizations than maybe a few years ago or pre-pandemic? Is that
Mm.
something that you see changing?
I think it depends on the organization.
Mm.
There are some places where it's like it's just so refreshing. I think one thing that the pandemic did invite was it invited all of us into each other's homes and into
Yeah.
each other's living.
Literally, right?
Literally, so it's like, if you have a kid kinda pop into your Zoom screen, it's not as taboo, right? I know we all, saw that CNN, I think it was CNN or
Yeah.
BBC,
Yeah.
the child runs it. But, that was, like, such an important moment for parents, I think, where it's like, "Oh my god, I could just sort of be myself," right? And so I do think that there's vulnerability just in the sense that, like, we were all thrust into, like, our home settings, and we
Yeah.
learned a lot, I think, about each other there. I think vulnerability is still really hard for most people,
Mm.
and especially as you get more and more senior in your career. Unfortunately, I think, society, like, dictates a lot of, what we think we need to be
Yeah.
based on what people, might need us to be or want us to be, or even what we, want people to perceive us to be. So, um, it's troubling. It's hard, for people to be vulnerable because it's scary to put yourself out there. But I think vulnerability is one of the most um, like magical things that a leader can offer to people because it really helps them be relatable to
Mm.
other people. And when you're relatable, you create much more powerful and strong connections. And then, it helps your ability to, rely on people more and, unlock potential in people if they, are able to relate to you a little bit more. I
Yeah.
think in the past, it was like, a lot of leaders like sat in an ivory tower and they pretended to be all these things and it's not relatable. And so people don't feel a sense of connection and it just doesn't lend itself to the best, results when you're trying to motivate teams and everything and kind of be in the trenches.
Yeah. What do you think vulnerability means? Like when you think of someone in your life, even that is or has demonstrated vulnerability to you or even a leader in an organization, what do you think about?
I think vulnerability is about being honest about who you are and where you are in that
Mm.
moment. And it starts with really being like having a deep knowing of yourself and being able and willing to share those parts of yourself that might be ugly, right? Like,
Yeah.
you might have warts and we all do. We all have these pieces of ourselves that we're really proud of, and we also have parts of ourselves that, we're not as proud of. But I think being vulnerable means really putting your whole self out there and taking risks with people and sharing and, being open in the spirit of, trying to connect authentically with the world
Mm.
and with the people around you.
Yeah. How did you learn how did you learn vulnerability? Like, do you remember a moment or a time when you really had that pivotal moment of like, whew, okay, here it is. I'm gonna put myself out there in the world. Have you ever had that happen?
Yeah, I don't know that there was like a defining moment for me, but what I would say is, I'm actually very introverted.
Mm.
Like I, get along with people and I'm, full of energy and all of that, but I struggle with like small talk.
Mm.
I like to get deep with people like quickly. And I know that that's kind of, it's not for everybody, but for me, in order to really connect with people authentically and to kind of get out of my comfort zone, find that if I'm vulnerable and I'm willing to share some things and open up at a different level, beneath the surface perhaps, with people, then, I found it was so much more rewarding, those connections that I was making by opening myself up and being vulnerable. So,
Yeah.
for me, that actually works. That's just, like, something that works for me both in my personal life and my professional life is to just be a little bit more open and be a little bit more vulnerable with people from the outset because it ends up, working for me in terms of the depth of relationships that I can have with people, that are really, like, more of what I prefer. So I would
Mm.
say, like, that's kind of how vulnerability has found its way into my life and the relationships that I have and just how I show up in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think the other thing is too is, like, it's just too much work to be someone that you're not.
Mm.
And,
Yes.
as you get older and, like, I certainly have a few gray hairs now, so, like, I have some wisdom of, like, look, I just don't have the time to be something I'm not, so I might as well just show the world my full self and,
Yeah.
again, including those parts that I might not be proud of, but, sometimes those parts are things that other people are struggling with, and again, it can bring, um, together some, like, beautiful connections and beautiful relationships into your life that maybe you didn't expect to have, so I think it's a good way to show up in the world.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think that's what I appreciated about you so much when I first got to connect with you through Emma. And it just what's so powerful about vulnerability and when we just allow ourselves to be who we really are is we then get met by people that also want to be that way too.
Yeah,
And the small talk just somehow goes away. I'm
right?
noticing there's less moments of small talk and we can just get right into it quickly
Yeah,
because there's just a willingness. There's an open-heartedness to be able to have that level of depth,
that's
which
right.
is really powerful.
Yeah.
Um, I want to shift gears a little bit now and talk a little bit about your own well-being. So you mentioned you have 3 kids, you have pets, you have a successful career. What tools are you using in your own life to support your well-being and how are you finding balance in like all of the things you're doing?
Yeah, first I'll say again, being vulnerable, like, it's hard, it's
Mm,
hard, and I don't even love the word balance because I think it signals that you have to have everything in, like, perfect homeostasis at all times, and
yeah.
so the way that I think about it is I actually focus rather on, like, how am I managing my energy and how am I managing my time? And
Mm,
I try to be as practical and, like, realistic with myself because no one wants to be disappointed day in and day out, like, "Oh, I've failed as a employee, I failed as a mother." Like, we have these high expectations of ourselves and, there's also all of these expectations that are out there in terms of, again, what society says we need to be in these different roles that we have or these different
yeah.
identities that we have. So I find it's a little bit more forgiving to kind of think about it in terms of, okay, like, how am I going to spend my time today and how am I going to manage my energy? And that
Mm,
means that some days I'm going to be far more focused and intentional about my role as a mother and the time and the energy that I place on that. And then there's going to need to be times when I need to spend a little bit more time, in my role as, chief people officer at my company or, perhaps as a friend or as a wife or whatever it is. And so I try to be intentional about that.
mm,
And I like the concept of energy management because I want to make sure that I'm spending time doing things during my day that are really giving me energy and are filling up my cup, as well as, doing the necessary things that maybe deplete my energy a little bit. And I think that that's where, I'd like to focus on a little bit of balance because that helps me keep my energy level, like, appropriate so that, again, I'm not always feeling depleted or burnt out. Um, More practically, some of the or more like tactically, some of the things that I do, like, first and foremost, anybody that knows me knows that I love sleep. I prioritize that, like, massively, and so, I don't stay up late. I would rather wake up early, and so I have to make sure that I get, ample sleep, because I am, a bit higher energy and, wanna make sure that I'm able to refresh and recharge. And also too that I'm, like, nourishing my body with the right food and nutrition that's, like, helping me. So, I mean, that could even be something like making sure I drink enough water throughout the day. It's nothing, like, super fancy. But those things are, like, my baseline. And then, I have different rituals and, like, ways that I wanna spend my time. So, again, as an introvert, in a role that spends a lot of time talking with people and, like, absorbing people's experiences, I find that I need, like, downtime. So
mm.
some people call it meditation. I don't love to call it meditation just because I feel like there's so much, like, wrapped up into, like, oh, your brain can't work and things like that. So I just like to say that I like quiet sitting time with myself, and
Oh, I
however
love
I
that.
decide to spend that time, it's like, hey, maybe it's just 15 minutes and I'm just laying on my bed, like, quietly, or, maybe I'm going for a walk and, there's no music, there's no nothing, I'm just, like, being present. So those things are just little hacks that help me stay really grounded. And then one thing that I do for myself every year is I try to carve out time, at least a weekend. Um, there's this there's this retreat center that I go to. It's in the Berkshires in Western Massachusetts, and it's a former yoga ashram, and
Mm,
they have just lots of wellness related things. They have like silent breakfast, for example, and they have, just like peaceful ways to connect in nature. So, I'll try to go there more as like a gift to myself,
yeah.
either on my birthday or something to celebrate myself and to really be intentional about how I want to welcome in this next year. And then just take a little bit of time without technology, without expectations, without caregiving responsibilities. And so that's really something I look forward to, and it's truly life-giving.
Yeah, I can only imagine. You mentioned this idea of presence.
Mhm.
What does it feel like, or how does presence play a role in how you show up as a person?
Hmm. Um, Whomever I'm with, I try to be really fully present for that person. And that can mean, listening to them actively and really trying to empathize and understand with whatever's going on for them, good, bad, or indifferent. Or just really trying to be, present in the setting that I'm in. Again, like it could just be like hiking and really appreciating like a waterfall that I come upon or something like that. But
Yeah.
I actually struggle a lot with being present because I have so many just mental demands on me at all times. So it's like, oh, this child needs to be there, or I'm supposed to be
Yeah.
in this meeting. There's a lot of things. So I think it's a practice for me in order to really strive to be present. But I
Mm,
find that when I am present, that's when I'm able to find life to be most enjoyable. And I'm able to really like appreciate the moment or the company or the connection that I'm like currently in. So, yeah, it's something I actively work towards and try to be mindful of every day, especially in like a super connected world. It's hard to be
yeah.
present.
Yeah. So we have a few minutes left. I want to talk now and shift gears again. There's
Mhm.
so many different topics I want to cover with you. And I want to talk a little bit about your executive coaching that you do. So tell me a little bit about the work you're doing. And, what I'd love to actually know is what are the things that people are asking you for help with? What are you finding are the biggest areas where people are needing help?
Yeah. Couple things that, have recently come up. Leaders, might be struggling, like, how do I get my team to, respect me more as a leader or connect
Mm,
with me more? You talked about how do I get my team to, kind of perform to their highest level? Like I am trying to motivate them, but it's not resonating. What am I doing wrong? So those are sort of like kind of things like people ask about with respect to leadership. And then there's other dialogues that I get into around I'm burnt out. How do I
mm,
show up in the best way every single day when I'm just not in it right now, or I'm struggling, right? So there's kind of like that personal dimension, the internal, and then it's like how do I show up for others, and that's like more of the external side of leadership. Um, I think a lot of this goes back to the concept I talked about a little bit with myself with respect to energy management.
mm.
Um, and it's along those same lines, but a little bit different. The mantra that I have is that, again, people are going to have what I call like superpowers or things that they're really, really good at.
Yep.
And then they're going to naturally have things that they're just not good at. And so, in terms of like coaching people, I never love to set out to try to fix somebody because I just don't think that that's the right, even like mindset to approach a coaching relationship or any kind of dialogue around. It's more around how do we put you in those roles, those settings, or those or give you those opportunities where what you're great at can really shine.
Yeah.
And that will then, help other people around you really, see you in your best light, and, you'll build that credibility and all of that. And then when you need to shift into some of the things that really aren't your forte, you kind of have some goodwill built and you have some credibility built. And then again, going back to vulnerability, I think it's okay to say, "Hey, I'm practicing this. I
Yeah.
know I'm not that I might not be the greatest communicator, or I might not find the right words to say, how much I appreciate you, but, could you come with me along my journey and, help me as I work on these things," right? I
Mhm.
think just being vulnerable and being honest about, like, "Hey, these are some of the things that, I'm trying to work through," is tremendously helpful for giving people, or really allowing yourself to have some grace from others around you.
Yeah.
um, and so, the entry point to those conversations is really, again, like personal reflection and self-awareness, and understanding, who do I want to be? Who do I think I am now? What is my personal value system? And, what impact or effect do I want to have on those people around me? And then with that information, you can then kind of craft a plan to, just start working on those things and
Yeah.
being honest about that.
Tell me about the way that you guide people through this. Like, are there qualities within yourself that you're using or you're harnessing to support others in opening up to themselves? Like, how does that work? Tell me more about it.
Yeah. So some people are, like we talked about, like they're just very open, and you'll ask them a question, you sort of get, a really broad, really helpful response. And then there's other people that are more guarded, and that's totally okay, right? We show up in the way that the world, has trained us to show up, right? And so sometimes when you ask a question and you sort of get like a surface level answer, or, oh, everything's cool, I don't really have anything to work on, those types of things. I found that questions are very powerful. So it's like, well, tell me, about, how do you think this person on your team might be perceiving how you're communicating? Or,
Mm,
what's a professional goal that you have that you want to work towards over the next year? Sometimes, um, you know, orienting the conversation in a way that really resonates for the individual. Like if they're achievement and outcome oriented, it's about talking about like, how do you, you want to get that promotion. Let's talk about, like, what does that promotion look like to you? What does that really mean to you to get that? And what are you willing to do, in terms of personal work to get where you need to be to, get that outcome, right? So I think it's about powerful questions and inquiry. And then, sometimes you just use your intuition. Like, hey, I sense that there's something that you're not sharing. Like, can we,
mm,
do I have your permission to go a little bit deeper so that we can really get to, what we need to know to set us on the right plan, right? So it's just, the power of inquiry and starting from a place of trust.
yeah. Talk to me about intuition because I think that it's such a powerful superpower that so many of us have, but sometimes there's a fear of harnessing our intuition. So, how do you use your intuition in the sessions you run, but also just in your life?
Yeah. Um, there's a lot of, dialogue in business today, especially again as you think about, like biases that exist at work and things like that. That says like, don't use your intuition. You need to always be using facts and data and logic.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily disagree that yes, many business decisions need to be made with facts, data, and logic. But as human beings, we should not be discounting intuition. It is an
Mhm.
evolutionarily, it's something that we've evolved over time to keep us safe and to protect us and to help us, move instinctually in the world. And so I think the best way to use intuition is to marry it with data and logic. So,
Mm,
for example, if you see a data set, it's like, hmm, I have questions about that. Something inside is telling me like maybe this isn't the full set of data. Like let's ask some questions. Let's probe a little bit more. Or it could be the other way around. Like, hey, this person, I sense that this person's really struggling with something. I'm going to go and sort of open up a conversation. And intuition is not just a feeling that you have. It's actually very subconscious messages that our brains pick up that we're not even aware of. Subtle
Mm.
cues like tone of voice, how somebody, if you're physically co-located with somebody, like their breathing, patterns or things like that, you might be able to pick up on that energy that somebody has, which then makes you feel like, oh, it's intuition, but it's actually subtle cues that your body picks up, and it tells your brain, like, maybe ask a question or maybe go this direction or that direction. So I
Yeah.
like to use a combination of, intuition plus data and logic.
Is there a moment that you remember where you really tapped into your intuition or kind of started to learn to trust yourself, or was it a process?
Um, I think a lot of things in my life have been a process, but
Mm.
I've always been like really intuitive. Even as a kid, I remember, sort of thinking something was gonna happen and it happened, or,
Yeah.
whatever it might be, right? That's probably a whole separate podcast, but, um,
Yeah, that'll be
but
part 2 of our conversation with Lauren. We'll go even deeper.
but, like, in my professional role, you know, again, sometimes I check in with people and it's like, "Yo, how's everything going?" "Oh, it's okay." And it's like, "Well, I'm sensing it's not. So let's talk
Mm.
about that," right? And so, you're able to sort of use that intuition in terms of what is the best way to communicate with this person? How might I want to approach a specific topic or even a difficult conversation based on what I know about this person and really trying to empathize with their experience in being a part of this conversation. So I think intuition has been incredibly powerful for me to use for myself, but also to help guide leaders and coach leaders, particularly with like difficult conversations or change that we're asking them to manage through, and just really trying to see and understand like what might happen in the future as an outcome, if we take one direction or another. So,
Yeah.
that's just one way I use it today a lot.
Oh, I love it. So much wisdom in what you're doing. And I just, as I'm listening to you speak, I feel a sense of like hope and inspiration about the way that you are showing up in the world and just the way that you share your intuitive side, your analytical side, the part of you that, has so much experience and the vulnerability in the way that you show up. So I'm just really appreciative of this conversation.
I appreciate it.
Um,
This has been a lot of fun.
how can we find you? So if someone, I'm sure, is right now listening to this and saying, I need to talk to Lauren, um, how can we find you?
I think the easiest and best way is to send me a LinkedIn request. I generally accept all requests. So send me a request with just a little bit of like a blurb, and we can connect. And I connect with my community that way. So that's probably the easiest way to get out, to get in touch. And then whether it's that you have a piece of advice that you're seeking, or you want to pursue connecting professionally, or for coaching or whatever it might be. I love connecting with people, especially like-minded folks who are into this realm and want to do personal growth work together. So that's the best way to connect. And I look forward to connecting with anybody who got value out of today's session with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lauren, for just being here, for the connection, for the conversation. And I'm looking forward. I feel like there might be a part 2 of this conversation. So for
I
anyone
would love
watching,
that. So much more to talk about.
for
We've just
sure.
scratched the surface.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
so much for being here. And hope you have a great rest of your day. And I'll see you soon.
yeah, take care. Thanks
Okay.
again.